Please note that the content of this episode has explicit language and is not suitable for underage listeners. Hi, I'm CJ, and I've been a phone sex operator for 23 years, so let's get started. I want to thank all of you who have sent questions to me and made comments. I really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know my email address, it is phonesexqueen1, the number 1, @gmail.com. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to email me there. I would love to hear from you. I wanted to take time to answer some questions, and not just at the end of my podcast, but to start out my podcast with some questions and answers for you. People have been super curious, so I thought I would change it up a bit. So one of the questions is, for those people who did not listen to my first podcast, how did I get started doing this? Well, my mother was reading the paper a long time ago, and she knew I was struggling financially, and I've been looking for a second job, and she said that she ran across an ad that this company was looking for a phone actress, and so she came over to me and said, "Why don't you apply for the job?" I said to her, "Do you really know what that is?" And she said, "Yes, I do. You have a nice voice. Why don't you at least try?" My mom could be very convincing, and I called and I hung up, and that was the first time. And then I called again and I left a message, and they called me back and they said they liked my voice and would I like a job? And I said, yeah, of course. And that was the beginning of how I started my phone sex career. I never could have imagined that 23 years later I would still be doing this, but here I am. When I would leave one company and look for another company, there is a website called sexyjobs.com where I would find companies that do phone sex, but I'm really lazy. And I always say that, and people tell me I'm not, but the companies wanted you to advertise for yourself, and I didn't want any of those. And then there were companies that were dispatched. Like I said, this is a dispatch company where they send the calls to you, which makes life easy. But there were other ones that weren't as easy. So I would look for the easiest company to apply to and go work for them. So that is how I got into this line of work. It's really thanks to my mom. So there you go for the person who, or the people who asked that. And that's probably the most asked question. Somebody asked me what a typical day or evening was doing phone sex. Well, there's no real typical day, but what I do is this. I come home from work, or I get off work depending on where I'm working, and I log in. When you log in, you don't immediately get calls. Sometimes you do, and it's like the first thing happens, you log in and boom. But a typical day is waiting, really. That's a lot of what it is. It's waiting for a call to come through. Some nights I'm really busy and it's call after call after call. And some nights it's not busy. It's one call, two calls, or no calls. So the day I'm recording this has been a very slow week for me, and I have not had a lot of calls, which is frustrating. And the calls that I've gotten have been repeat customers, which is great, but you can't predict how many calls you're going to get in any given night. So there's no typical. But these are the scenarios of a typical week. Some nights you get a call after call, like I said. Some nights you can get zero. So it just depends. My Mondays are pretty quiet. For whatever reason, Monday, I don't get a lot of calls. And then as the week goes on, I get more. This past week, I'm recording this in July, and it's been pretty slow. But every day is different, so you just log in and be surprised. Someone asked how I handle difficult or unusual requests from a caller. So a caller calls me requesting something that I don't want to talk about. I have a couple of options. One is I can tell them I don't take calls like that, and that's pretty simple, and I tell them to call someone else. This is not frowned upon because that saves them money, and if they're hell-bent on talking to me, which has happened before, no, they don't want to call anyone else, they want to talk to me, then what they seem to do is try to placate me and tell me it's okay, and we start a phone sex call. And they will bring in the subject that I don't really want to talk about, and if that happens, I either divert it to something else, or I try to change the subject, or I just moan and don't say anything. It's a difficult thing to navigate if someone's asking me a question, will you or would you talk about this or that? I'm usually pretty honest. So one of the things someone will say is, I really want a call that has age play. Well, you can't talk about underage people, so I'll say, well, a good age that I'm okay with is 16, 17. And if they want to go younger, I tell them, look, I'm not comfortable with that. If you sound older, then I'll say, look, I'm in my 30s, you're in your 50s or 60s. Aren't I young enough? I've even said, I think I've mentioned this before. Let's not say a number. let's just keep a number out of it. And it's really ambiguous, and I'm okay with being ambiguous. There are a lot of unusual requests, and it can also depend on my mood. So I handle them very delicately because they may call back with a different request. And I don't want to turn them off to calling me back again, so I tread lightly. But I do most of the time tell them the truth so that they can call someone else and get what they want. You know, it's very interesting because I've told you where people call with the same fantasy, same role play, same thing over and over again. But if someone calls and I don't want to talk about that subject, that doesn't mean that they're going to call me every single time with the same subject. So I want to be careful and not piss them off so that they do call me back. Someone asked me an interesting question, and that was, is it emotionally challenging to engage with clients? So I would say most of the time, no. I know I've told you that I feel sad or bad for older callers who are lonely, but one of the things I've learned to do over time is to not get emotionally involved. And people say, well, how do you do that? The way to do that is to understand that this is a job. These are not people you know, and don't get emotionally involved. That isn't always easy. I've told you that there have been callers that I like talking to, and there's a fine line where you have to realize it is a job and that you cannot get emotionally attached to a caller. If you're the type of person who is unable to control their emotions or gets easily attached, then this is not for you. However, I have learned that once I hang up the phone, I'm on to the next one and it doesn't carry with me. So I equate it to this, and it sounds sort of weird, but maybe I can explain it better. I recently had a conversation with someone about having a friends with benefits type of relationship. And most women get attached and most men don't. And I'm not saying all of anything, but most of the time it's the women who can't detach. Women get attached. And so I have been in that type of relationship, and the friends with benefits relationship, and I have remained detached from the person who is the friends with benefits. I'm not in love. I don't want to marry this person. I don't want to ruin their relationship. And that's kind of how I feel about doing this. It's not emotionally challenging for me because I just let it roll off my back. And that doesn't mean I don't have emotions, because I do. I have a lot, plenty. But you have to know where to put it. And I don't put it with this job. This job is very unemotional. I've told you I do like some of my callers. I am not emotionally invested in them, but I do like them. And people find it hard to believe, but it's true. I'm not emotionally invested in them. Now, when I talk to people about them, like I'll say, hey, I had this caller last night and he was this or that or the other. That doesn't mean I'm emotionally attached or involved or emotionally driven by this person. It's just a conversation. I'm not super special, but you kind of have to be special to do this or have some sort of talent. And you have to separate yourself and not be involved with the person on the phone. That doesn't mean you can't sound involved. I care about every single person who calls. At least that's how I make them feel. I want them to think they're special. I want them to think I care about them and their situation, whatever their situation is. But when I hang up that phone, when the phone call is done, I don't hang up before they do. So when the phone call is done, I'm on to the next. And that doesn't mean I don't think about the other person, like my special caller who has those amazing fantasies. I think about him, but I also have my real life, and that is what's important to me. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope that makes sense. A really good one, how do I ensure my safety and privacy while I do this? Well, I don't use my real name, and I don't tell anybody the city I live in. I think it's important to know more about them than they do need to know about me, of course. Of course, I tell them things, but I don't tell them anything where they could find me. I don't promise that I'll meet them. I don't tell them I live, 2 blocks away from them or whatever it is. I really try hard to stay anonymous. So somebody wanted to send me something. Actually, a lot of people wanted to send me something. I got a P.O. box in a different city, which made me feel safer than I probably would if I had one in my own city. So having had the P.O. box, when I get a notification that someone sent me something, it's great. I did at one point have some kind of delivery service where I could tell them to deliver it to a P.O. box or something. I don't recall, but I remember coming home one day to a huge box, and it was a microwave oven because I had a wish list. And on my wish list, not only sex toys and lingerie, but I had a microwave oven because I needed one, and someone bought me one, and it was routed to my home. So people do ask where I live in the state that I'm in, and I don't tell them where specifically. I do tell them other cities around me. So I think I mentioned this guy once. He lived about an hour south of me. Where I told him I lived was like, let's call it an hour and a half to 2 hours north of where he lived. And he kept saying, I'll come up to you, and we'll go out for coffee. As tempted as I was, I always kind of shake my head and go, no, you can't do that. And then I move on. There's always, I say always, but there's always a reality check in my brain saying, no, you can't meet this person. It could be very safe. It could be very fine. But again, I'm not the girl in the picture that would be devastatingly horrible for both parties for me to show up and say, look at me, here I am. And they go, who are you? And then they would write some horrible feedback on my platform. And that would be the end of my phone sex career. So I stay away and I stay anonymous, and that's it. The other point is people could get violent. They could be really sweet and nice on the phone, but if you aren't who you say you are and you don't fess up before you go meet them, then that could be a problem. And like I said, I don't talk to other sex girls, sex workers, phone sex girls, whatever, but it's not a good idea. So I think that is a great question. I do keep myself safe. That is my number one priority, of course, besides having feedback that's horrible, which of course, could end this job for me, but safety is the most important thing. That's a great question, so thank you very much. Someone asked me what kind of rules and guidelines do I have to follow. It's pretty loosey-goosey, but there are some things that you cannot talk about, and I said this before, so a lot of this is repetitive, and I apologize, but so the company claims they do listen into your conversations. Probably not. They have too many people on the platform at one time to listen in on the conversation, but it's up to me to navigate that. So some of the things you're not allowed to talk about are rape, incest, underage, drugs, sex with animals. Now, to be fair, I've had all of these calls at any given time. I don't like these types of calls. And again, what I find interesting is that the calls don't start out this way. So it's not like someone calls and says, I want to rape you, or why don't you take a hit of coke, or I want you to have sex with my dog. They start out, I would call it normal, but they really do start out as a regular call and turn it into a call that I'm not supposed to take, or a subject matter I'm not supposed to talk about. It's frustrating because, again, I have to change the subject or change the topic and hope they don't hang up because they really want to talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. It excites them, and I could be the phone operator who doesn't want to talk about that, and that is upsetting. But it is necessary sometimes. Other than that, we are pretty free to talk about what we want to talk about. We really have to use our best judgment. And, sometimes you can let them know, I can't say that. I can't talk about that. And they always know. But they try to push the boundaries. Look, who doesn't want to push boundaries, right? But it's really frowned upon, and all the companies are the same. I think I've mentioned this before. All companies really do have the same guidelines. This is what you can't talk about, and don't give out any personal information. Don't talk about these subjects. So it carries on with you from place to place. So by the time you've worked at one or two places, you really do know what you are able to and not to talk about. Again, sorry for rambling on, but it is important that we do use our best judgment. So thank you. A good question is, what skills or qualities or even talents are important for someone in your line of work? Well, again, I sound really redundant, and I have mentioned this before in the first call, but the first skill or quality I think that is important is to listen. Everybody's so interested in talking, they don't listen. People are calling for a reason, and that reason is to talk to you and to tell you something. Whatever that something is, your primary job, as far as I'm concerned, is to listen to what the caller says. You need to hear what the person is saying and give them what they want. Now, that's really hard because some people don't stop talking. There are calls where the guys just won't stop talking, and you wonder, how can you be excited when you won't stop talking and you barely let me say anything? Isn't that the point, to at least let me say something? And you just are shocked. Let me say anything. At that point, it's on them, not you, as a phone sex operator, but I have found, and I've said it before, that the best phone sex operator is the one that sounds authentic and listen. Nobody's ever said to me, you don't listen to me. No one's ever said to me, why won't you let me finish or let me talk? I did that. Well, there was that one guy that said, wait, but that's super rare. I hear from men that some of the phone girls say, they don't want the guys to talk too much. They don't want to listen to what the guys have to say. That's all part of the job. No phone sex operator should tell a caller they talk too much. It's our job to listen and to give the caller what they want, even if it's just an ear. That to me is the number one most important thing. And if you can't listen, if you have an opinion, if you have a need to regurgitate, if you will, all over your caller, you have no business doing it. I've also said a million times, this job is not about me. This is about the caller. It's about what the caller wants. It's about them. They can ask me on every single call what I want. And at the end of the day, I want what you want. I want whatever it is that you want as the caller. You aren't calling to make me happy. And if you are, or you think you are, you're absolutely not. Now, I know they say they want to please you. They want to please their woman. It's fine. But I want you to get what you want out of that. And if it is to please me, fine, we'll do that. One of the other things is to be creative. Now, I've never felt like I've been a creative person or that I'm a creative person at all. But you can learn how to be quick on your toes if you're listening to the caller. After a while, you know what to say. It can be very routine to you, but you sound spontaneous to them. So just trying to be a little creative is a good talent to have. Sometimes I crack up at my callers because of my responses to them. When someone becomes a phone sex operator and you have a name and the profile, the best thing you can do is figure out what your strengths are and bring that to the job. So for example, if you're really into a subject like bondage or submission, then that is what you should put in your profile because it's something you like and and you can speak to it. Don't put something in there that you have no idea about and then you won't be successful. So really it's really about your strengths and what you can provide to your caller. It really is that simple. But remember, if you want to get into this line of work, you have to listen. That will make you stand out. Because again, most of the calls that I get, I listen and they are very appreciative because they can't talk to people in their real life about what they want to talk to me about. And if I just ramble on like I'm doing now, then I won't be successful. So just keep that in mind. The question that I find interesting is what are some of the misconceptions people have about phone sex and people that call phone sex lines? I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that all people are like twisted. And what I mean by that are sick in the head or vile or whatever those words are that you want to use. And like I've mentioned to you in the past, there are all types of people that call. And what people don't understand is, and I've said this before, again, this whole podcast is kind of repeated, but people are lonely and have no one to talk to, and they call a phone line. That is really one of the biggest misconceptions that you have to be a degenerate or something like that, and it's nothing like that. And it even surprised me. And sometimes it still surprises me that people want to call, but they don't want to have phone sex. They just want to talk. And it doesn't happen often, like I've said. But when it does happen, it's a pleasant surprise. It's a nice change. You know, my sister and I always say you never know what someone's going through or you never know what someone's life is like. And it's very true. The ones that call and want to share with you, you get a glimpse into their life and you really do get to learn about them. So I've mentioned this guy before, the one that brought me something back when he went to England. When he calls me now, it's really just to talk. It's not for phone sex anymore. It's to tell me what's going on in his life or what's not going on in his life. And I've just become this non-judgmental person who he finds to be pretty and wants to talk to me about whatever it is. So I think that's the biggest misconception, that people just call because they want a friendly ear, but they don't want to be judged. The misconception is that everyone's crazy or sex driven or whatever. No one said you have to call a phone sex line to have phone sex. There are no rules about what we talk about other than what the rules I just said. You don't have to call to have phone sex. I don't get upset that someone just wants to talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. I'm there for them for whatever they would like to discuss and pay for. It's all good. If I have a whole night of people just calling me and talking, I think it's fabulous. So the misconception is that people are all just sex starved and whatever. A follow-up to that misconception call is, I've had a couple callers, and it's been a while since I've had this type of call, but there was a time, and it was really close together. They were really close together. I find it strange, but a guy would call me and he would say, you're a whore for doing this. And he would go on and on about the type of person I am for doing this. Well, I said to him, my response was really strange. I said, why are you calling me? What does that make you? Now, I don't mean to be combative, but don't call me names if you don't know me. That's what really gets to me. I don't mind you calling me names, but know what you're talking about. This person didn't. He called me all sorts of mean names for being a phone sex operator. And I'm like, well, you're paying for it. Does that make any sense? And he didn't say anything. He just hung up the phone. This went on, and much like the political calls I get. So you really do have to have a thick skin to not let this type of call get to you. It doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that these people call you names for no reason, and it's okay. The misconception is also that women that do this come from a broken home or an abusive home or something of that nature. When they find out I haven't been molested, I haven't been abused in any way, shape, or form, that often surprises the caller as well. That is a misconception. They think that we all have this terrible home life or background, and when they ask, which isn't often, but when they do, that's one thing I'm very proud of, that I didn't come from any of that. I came from a good, stable, loving family, and so when the question then would be, well, why are you doing this? And you don't know why I'm doing this, so I don't have to explain myself. But I do, and that surprises them. So the misconception on the other side is that we all come from broken homes and we are really screwed up. So, there's misconceptions on both sides, what the caller is and who I am as a phone sex operator. And, I'm not going to let them know, or I'm not going to lie to them and tell them, yes, I was molested or whatever. No, I tell them the truth. And if they want a broken girl, if you will, I don't really mean to say that, but if you want someone who has had a difficult past, then they'll hang up on me and call someone else. So it looks like I got a little carried away with the questions. Sorry about that. No phone sex stories this time, but we'll leave it at that. And the next episode, I will continue with my callers. Thank you for listening to Secrets from a Phone Sex Queen, everything you always wanted to know about phone sex and more. Please email me. I won't make a whole production over emails again. It'll always stay at the end, but email me at phonesexqueen1@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook at CJCJ and on Instagram at phonequeen1. Until next time, stay sexy and thanks for hanging in there with me.